Raider Nation, thank you for joining us on the Only Nation podcast, brought to you by the Raider Ramble and sponsored by Chucky's Thugs, and now also sponsored by Betway. My name is Heidi, but you may know me as Kevlar Pondress or even Raider Ladybug. I'm here with, well, T3 Raider Facts, and we're ready to talk some Raiders football together.
All right, Heidi and Raider Nation, the Raiders are now 3-0 in the preseason, but there's still some work to do before the season actually starts.
Today on the show, we'll discuss the Raiders' preseason victory over the Dolphins, preparations for the last preseason game this week at home against the Patriots, isolate on a few player performances, and touch on a little drama that has been stirred up within Raider Nation again.
Okay, Raider Nation, we would love to hear from you, so here's how you can get in touch with us. Give us a call on the Only Nation podcast voicemail line at 904-701-8667. That's 904-701-8667. You can also check us out on the web at onlynationpod.com.
Here's the latest Raider news.
The Las Vegas Raiders traveled to South Florida and picked up a 15-13 victory over the Miami Dolphins on Saturday night. Jarrett Stidham went 7 for 10 for 80 yards and led the Raiders on an opening touchdown drive. Britton Brown led the rushing attack with 70 yards on 9 carries, and the receiving corps was led by reserve tight end Jared Horsted and 2 other guys fighting for roster spots, Keelan Cole and Tyron Johnson.
All right, now we'll talk about some of the players involved in the game, and by the time the podcast comes out, the roster will either be close to or already past the cut down to 80 players before the final cut down to 53 players on August 30th, which is fast approaching. But it's always good to get a win. Heidi, what do you think about the game?
You know, I appreciated again that Josh McDaniels seems to be taking the preseason seriously, which, you know, wins and losses don't matter. They really don't. But you need to take it seriously and realize that it's an opportunity to advance your team and make progress. And it seems like that's what he's doing. So that's kind of refreshing to see. The Raiders left a lot of players behind in Las Vegas. So I think we got a good look at the rotational and depth of the roster.
Yeah, you're right about that. And I think a lot of Raider Nation, when I looked at Twitter and Facebook, were kind of melting down about the fact that there were some certain players that performances weren't up to speed. They were starting to automatically worry about the team. But again, this was an over-glorified practice with uniforms. And again, I think Miami was doing the same thing. Miami played a lot of starters, so I think for them it was a lot more of a dress rehearsal than it ended up being for the Raiders, because the Raiders were missing a lot of key people. But I think what they did was it really gave the guys an opportunity to take another look to see who potentially can make this squad. And if not, who can look good to possibly be able to latch on with another squad. So I like the approach that McDaniels and Ziegler have taken. It hasn't been the most stellar players on the field, and of course not the most stellar performances, which we will talk about. But again, it was a good practice session. Aside from the one injury, thoughts and prayers going out to Mr. Jenkins. But aside from that, they came away pretty unscathed. And again, we'll talk about in more detail some of the game and what we need to do and next steps going forward. But I like where the team is right now.
Yeah, between you, me, and the wall, I'm not very. I'm a little hesitant about Jenkins. It did not sound like it was very promising in the press conference today. You can kind of tell when a coach is skirting around the truth, and I kind of got the impression when he was talking about Jenkins.
I think he's pretty much done for the year. I mean, I'd be surprised if he wasn't, and if he was able to come back in mid to late part of the season, I don't think he would be anywhere near where he was coming into training camp.
Yeah, I hate to write a guy off, just based on one little press conference, a few hours after the game, but I'm kind of leaning in that direction.
We'll find out more, obviously, this week, but the news certainly doesn't sound good. But again, thoughts and prayers, go out to our friend, our Raider friend, Mr. Jenkins, and we just have to move on. It's next man up.
Yeah, but then again, a week and a half ago, everyone was writing Brandon Parker off for the entire year. They said that, he had a torn, triceps or
torn triceps, yes.
Yeah, and now they're not writing him off for the rest of the year. So I know that you're very concerned about him because you really want to see him at the right tackle spot starting. So we'll see if we can get him out there for that.
I'll be honest with you. I've given him a lot of grief over the last couple of years, but he's come out to be a pretty good swing player. But a swing player, somebody who can fill in the gaps. I certainly don't want to see him starting, and I think there's probably a lot of people in Raider Nation that would agree with me on that. But having said that, I think he has proven himself as an adequate backup. But we need somebody to stabilize that right tackle position.
Yeah, a swing tackle that stays only on the right side. I don't want to see him on the left side again.
No, absolutely. That was a failed experiment.
Yes, kind of like, I was really positive for Alex Leatherwood, a month or two ago, saying, he's going to get it this year and, he's going to prove everything. And, oh my God, he's going to get Derek Carr killed.
I could just see it now. They start Brandon Parker at the left tackle spot, and then the coaches call Stidham over the sidelines and say, "Okay, now, Jared, we're just going to give you a little bit of advice coming into this game. Run, Forrest!
Run far, run fast."
Absolutely.
Okay, so what did you like in the game?
All right, here's what I really liked. The Raiders took the ball on the opening drive and they went 12 plays, converting both third downs and a fourth down, and then punching the ball into the end zone. And they did it without being flagged one single time. Now, I know there were some starters missing, but if the Raiders can come out firing on all cylinders at the beginning of each game, they can start becoming more comfortable with playing with a lead instead of having to come from behind. And I think that will make all the difference in this team this season.
All right, let's look at some individual performances. Let's talk about the offensive line as a group. We already talked about Alex Leatherwood. He looked lost a lot of times out there. And Raider Nation is already screaming to pull the plug on the Alex Leatherwood experiment at right tackle. Right now, I would like to see him at right guard again because I'm afraid of seeing him at right tackle myself.
Yeah, I want to remind everyone that when Alex Leatherwood was drafted by a different regime, he was being moved to a position he wasn't initially comfortable with or experienced at. And I place the blame on the scouting department and the coaching staff. And while I still believe that Leatherwood has a lot of talent, it may never be at tackle. Probably not. You'll remember back in 2004 when Robert Gallery was drafted number 2 overall and was pronounced as the savior at tackle. Well, it didn't work out so well. But he did prove to be a serviceable guard. Now, maybe the same thing happens here. But the bottom line is now you cannot wait any longer. It's time to bring in a veteran free agent who can be a plug-and-play guy right now. We've talked about Darrell Williams. I've also heard the name Nate Solder, a former Patriot, come around. But again, they've got to do something, and they've got to do it soon.
Yeah, and Leatherwood, he did excel in college. He really did. But he excelled mainly as a guard.
Absolutely, sure.
That's where he was comfortable at and at left tackle. But I think he made the biggest impact as a guard.
Well, and so many times we talk about the Gruden and Mayock regime, they would pull a player and then try to plug him in at a different spot. Now, we saw that with numerous players, and they didn't work out well overall. I love John Gruden as a Raider. I love John Gruden as an analyst, and I thought that when I looked at it in retrospect, that he was really the right guy for Mark Davis to bring in to kind of put the Raiders back on the map. But I never really trusted him as a personnel guy. And as we start looking at the draft, particularly the 2020 draft, boy, things have just come up snake eyes all over the place with that draft.
Well, I think that you can look at Gruden's time heading the regime in Tampa Bay, and that kind of tells you everything that you need to know about him as a personnel guy, which isn't much.
Right. And I've heard many times, he inherited Tony Dungy's team, and I continually have to give Tony Dungy props for putting that Tampa Bay defense together. People talk about Tom Brady coming in and winning a Super Bowl with Tampa Bay, but he was never going to go to that team if it wouldn't have been for the defense put together around him. And if you look back at that game, again, the Tampa Bay defense just crushed Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes. If it hadn't been for the defense, they probably would not have won that Super Bowl. So again, it's all a process of putting together the scheme, knowing what players you need, and knowing where to put them.
Still proving the old principle, defense wins championships.
Defense wins championships, absolutely. And I still, even if Tony Siragusa, rest in peace, had not crunched Rich Gannon, I'm not sure that the Raiders win that game. The Ravens' defense was just too stellar that year, and I'm just not sure that they come out with a victory in that game. But again, you got to have a solid defense to win a championship.
I firmly believe that. As much as people try to say that's not true anymore, I just don't believe it. I think you need that defense.
Right. So who do you think had a really good game? Let's throw some love at some guys who showed us something on Saturday night. Who did you really like?
What was his name? Bauer?
Bauer, yes.
Dang, he had a great game. He was all over the place.
He did. He really did. Tyron Johnson showed a little bit more promise as well. But again, that defense continues to play solid in the preseason. They gave up only 13 points on Saturday. Now, if you do that consistently, you're going to win a lot of games. It was good to see Jonathan Hankins return to the active roster, and he made an almost instant impact in the Patrick Graham 3-4 scheme. Now, Hankins made 2 tackles, including 1 solo stop, and although his action was limited, I think he helped set the tone for a defensive front that allowed Miami only 34 yards rushing in the game. Now, you mentioned this man's name earlier. I want to put a plug in for defensive end Tashawn Bauer. The Raiders are looking for somebody to step up as quality depth from the pass rushing position. And Bauer threw his hat into the ring on Saturday. He had 1 quarterback sack. He had 1 quarterback hit, 2 tackles for loss, and 5 tackles. Now, if he can have another performance equal to that against the Patriots during the coming week, I think you're going to find him on that 53-man roster.
I think he might really be able to establish himself this week in practice because the Raiders will be practicing against the Patriots throughout the week in preparation for that game.
I think they will. So we'll see what happens, actually. But Tashawn Bauer is an example of somebody who's just come out of nowhere and taken the brass ring and run with it. And I applaud him for all of his hard work, but he really came out in this game, and I was impressed with the work ethic, but I was also impressed with just the performance itself.
Yeah, and Tyron Johnson made a lot of progress. Cole wasn't really able to build on his progress, not because he didn't play well, but because he didn't really have much of an opportunity. But I think the Raiders might be edging towards Johnson instead of Cole, even though I'm not sure how much I agree with that.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. And I know when Raider Homer was with us and he pulled out the name of Keelan Cole and talked about what a great asset he was going to be, I was really in the firm belief of the camp that he was going to be the guy. But now I think they've kind of settled on Mac Hollins as the number 2, and then having Renfro be the slot guy. But Tyron Johnson, he's got a lot of speed and he's a young guy. So you bring a young guy in like that, and let him prove himself in a variety of ways. He might be able to run back some kicks or punts as well. But he's really improved a lot, and I see him. I'm going to go ahead and make the statement now that I see him making the 53-man.
Yeah, and I've liked what I've seen out of Hollins too. I really have.
Yeah.
The one thing I will comment on, it's not that he had a great game. He had a very good hit, Jonathan Abram, on Mike Gesicki. He rocked that ball loose, but what worries me is why is he playing in the third quarter of that preseason game?
One thing that I really liked is that Jonathan Abram didn't make just one good play, but he made several good plays. And I have to credit the defensive alignment for putting him in a place where he can make a good play and kind of guarding against the fact that he's not going to be covering those tight ends or backs coming out of the backfield, which was his weakness last year, obviously. But he went on a couple of blitzes. He hit hard. He seemed to be more in the right place at the right time, which is something that we haven't seen consistently. Now, part of that may be the rest of the defense being where they were actually supposed to be as well. Last year, we saw guys that were just kind of running around all over the place, and people were lost in space. And I'm not seeing that as much with this team this year, which really gives me a lot of encouragement when we start looking at the beginning of the season.
Yeah. The Raiders didn't pick up his 5th-year option, but he still has a chance to make an impact. and show that he can either be used carefully in the right position, or I don't think he's going to ever become a cover safety. I don't think he's ever going to do that. But
I don't think he will either.
He might be usable in the right situations.
That's true. And the one thing I have to credit him with is even though he came in and they didn't have his option picked up, a lot of people would kind of sulk and come in not really motivated. But what I saw on the field this past week against Miami was a very motivated cheerleader on the field. He was revving up his fellow players. He was helping getting them in the right position. So I saw everything that you would really see from a proven vet. And this is a guy who really wants to make this team, and I think is doing everything within his power to make that happen.
Yeah, and he is playing like a person that might not be guaranteed that spot.
Yeah.
Trying to earn it.
And that's different from when they first came in. When he first came in, I think he was kind of anointed as, okay, you're a first-round draft pick and you're going to be a starter, and it's yours to lose. He didn't have that coming in this year. I think all the tea leaves were turned to the fact that if you don't work hard, not only you're not going to be a starter, you may not even make the team. So you could either take that as motivation, or you could take that and just take your ball and go home. And I like the approach that he's used so far in camp and during the games.
Yeah. All right. We have to at least address the elephant in the room. On Saturday, UFC president Dana White made the statement that he was very close to landing both Gronk and Tom Brady in Las Vegas back in 2020. But that John Gruden put the kibosh on the deal. Should we read anything into that statement? And more importantly, does that statement, true or not, affect Derek Carr and his chemistry with the team or the fan base? And Dana White is not an NFL agent. He has more important things to do than mess around with stuff like that. He thinks he's more important than he is for the NFL. And, he's UFC. He's not the NFL. I know that they wanted to make a big splash with the Raiders moving to Vegas in 2020. And I know the talk was Brady to Vegas, and Gronk was even mentioned in rumors. But I just never really put much stock into that, and I still don't.
It's easy to run almost any kind of narrative you want when you're holding the Super Bowl trophy. Now, we all know that Dana White's a talker, and we all know that both Brady and Gronk are used to the limelight. Now, I think it's a cheap shot toward both Derek Carr and the city of Las Vegas for them to all start running their mouths and saying, oh, yes, this was going to happen. Now, the truth of the matter, I truly believe, is that Tom Brady recognized that the Raiders, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, were not going to make a deep run. And I don't think there's any way he could have coexisted with Gruden to begin with. So anything that any of them has to say about the Raiders or Gruden or the city of Las Vegas should just be largely ignored. We have a new system in place now, a new structure that's both functional and solid, and we have a franchise quarterback who I believe is on the verge of having his best year ever. So Raider Nation, calm down, settle down. It's just something to make you bite, and a lot of us have done that. We just need to settle back and enjoy the process that we have now, and we haven't had a process like this ever. And I can truly say that. I've been following the Raiders a long time. This is different. This feels different. This is different. It's a different approach. We've got new players in place. We've got some players that are held over that have now bought into it, and they know what they're doing. They know why they're doing it, and I think we're going to see good results this year. So Dana White, go back to your UFC. Gronk, do what it is you do, and Brady, the next time somebody hands you a Super Bowl trophy, try not to drop it in the water.
Try not to get so drunk that you need your wife to walk you home.
True that.
Okay, it is time for T3's Top 3. Can you bless us with them, T3?
T3's Top 3.
All right, let's see what we can do this week. Here is this week's T3's Top 3. Number 1, Luke Masterson and Darian Butler were both signed as undrafted free agents back in May of this year. All they've done has resulted in something rare, yet something this team desperately needed. Two young, hungry, undrafted players to step up in a linebacking room that was pretty depleted and then establishing themselves as frontrunners toward making the squad. Masterson has even worn that coveted green dot on occasion. I look forward to seeing what the respective products out of Wake Forest and Arizona State will do over the course of the 2022 season. Number two, when we did our mock draft back in 2020, the only guy that the Raiders drafted who I had on my board was Amik Robertson. The young man had a bumpy first year, but I'd really hoped that he would turn the corner and be able to work his way into a rotational slot corner piece or perhaps even a starter. Now, after the recent game against Miami, I think he has a lot of work to do in order to justify the Raiders just keeping him around for one more year. Now, I hate feeling this way, but unless he really steps it up against New England, I think one more guy from that faded 2020 draft class is going to be making an early exit. And number three, the refs are still out to get us. Toward the end of the second quarter against Miami, the Raider defense blew up a Miami receiver who fumbled the ball, and defensive back Sam Webb scooped it up and ran toward the opposing end zone with no one around him. The refs ruled it as an incomplete pass, and the play was whistled dead. Replays showed that the receiver clearly had the ball and was advancing forward when he was hit. A challenge awarded the ball to the Raiders, as it should have, but the blown whistle killed the play and took 7 points off the board for the Raiders. I know it's only preseason, but I will continue to keep a close eye on how the referees call Raider games. The Raiders only had 2 penalties for 10 yards against Miami, so they're continuing to cut down on their mistakes. But we don't need the guys in black and white stripes helping the competition to stop the inevitable, and that is the Raiders winning a 4th Lombardi. And that is this week's T3's Top 3.
Thank you, T3. What I can say about Luke Masterson and Darian Butler is I hope that the Raiders ignoring the linebacker position is finally going to pay off for once. Because the Raiders are really good at ignoring that position, and it is a pet peeve of mine.
You and I have shared that sentiment for a long time.
They're almost as good at ignoring it as they are the defensive tackle position. Although I think the defensive tackle position might actually hurt them more this year, especially if there's just one injury. If there's just one injury in the defensive tackle group, it could really go south. But it's good to see them hungry. It's good to see them contributing. And hopefully that makes some good rotational players if both of them end up making the 53-man roster.
They've certainly played well.
Yeah. Amik Robertson, he is somebody who I never really saw justified taking where he was. And he wasn't even taken that high. What was he, 4th or 5th round or something?
He was a fourth rounder. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He's so small. He's like 5'8". I mean, he's a tiny little guy.
He's small.
And I never saw him as an effective corner. I'm rooting for the guy. I really am. I want him to do well. I want him to prove us wrong. I want him to prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. I've been questioning his draft since the beginning. So come on, Amik, prove me wrong. Show me up. I want to see you turn the corner and really make an impact for the Raiders this year. The refs are still out to get us. Well, I will say that preseason is practice time for the refs along with the teams. So, of course, they are still they're practicing their calls. What they're doing is they're practicing how to screw the Raiders the best.
There we go. There it is.
You were afraid I was going to let them go, weren't you?
I wonder if you're going to let them off the hook, but there you go.
Yeah, it was a bad play. They shouldn't have called it dead. If there's any question, the refs are supposed to let the play continue. They blew it. They corrected it as much as they could on the call. It's the Raiders. The league is always going to screw the Raiders. It's what the Raiders were founded on. Al Davis made sure that that's That's our legacy, and it's going to continue to be that way for a long time. As long as the Davis name is involved with the Raiders, there's going to be some screwing going on, and it's not going to be in our favor.
I think it's going to be even longer than that. I think as long as just as the Raiders logo, the shield, the colors, everything, I think it's just always going to be ratcheted up. And it's a legacy that's lasted 60 years, and I think it'll last 60 years times 5. I mean, as long as there's going to be an NFL and there's going to be Raiders, I think that there's a bias against them from the refs. And people can say what they want, but there are plenty of examples where that conspiracy theory holds true.
It's just a chippy part of their relationship. And part of it comes down to the Raiders wear black uniforms at least half of the season. There is an intrinsic bias against teams in dark uniforms. That's been scientifically studied. So I can't just give the NFL a pass based on that, but that's just the start.
So all the people that think the Raiders should change their uniforms to black jerseys and black pants, they just need to keep that in mind. You think it's bad now, just wait until we go all black. Then it would be even worse.
I think it'd be sweet, though.
I don't know about that.
All right, give us a call at 904-701-8667. Leave us a voicemail or text message at that number, or send in a message via social media, and we'll share your thoughts. So what's going on with Raider Roots this week, T3?
Okay, so the next episode that's coming out is a return to the year 2001, which would actually turn out to be John Gruden's last season in Oakland, part 1 anyway. So be on the lookout for that episode. And then on the tail of that, which will probably come out a week after, will be a revisit to a game that hardly any of us actually want to go and revisit, and that's the one that involved the tuck rule. But there's a lot of little things about the tuck rule game that you may not know, which we're going to go through and highlight the whole game and take a look at it from beginning to end. So it's really interesting when you look at the entire game, not just that one part of that one play, which certainly impacted not only that game, but the direction of two franchises.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that episode. Of course, I've already heard this week's episode. I uploaded that today, so it's ready to go. But I remember the episode about the Immaculate Reception. I learned so much about that game and the NFL and the rules of that time just by listening to that episode. So it was really enlightening, and hopefully it'll be the same with this next episode as well.
Well, thanks. There is a lot of information packed into this one, so we'll get that up pretty soon. So everybody be patient. We'll get through 2001, and then we'll get to we'll call it the tuck rule game. People call it by another name, but we want to try to keep this family oriented as much as possible. So we'll just leave it there.
Well, it's one of the editions of the Snow Bowl. There's a few Snow Bowls, but we could call it one of those.
We could. Most of Raider Nation probably will not, though.
Anyway, how about we find out what we do or we don't know? What's our question for the week?
Now it's time for another edition of Did You Know? In this segment, I will ask Heidi and the rest of our listening audience a Raiders-related question with 3 possible answers to choose from. It's multiple choice, so just give it your best guess. So here goes with this week's question. Hall of Famer Tim Brown is considered by many to be the greatest kick returner in Raiders history. Hard to argue with that. And even though he did return both kickoffs and punts, he was not the one who recorded the most yardage for punt returns during a single season. Which Raider did that? Was it A, Roger Byrd in the year 1967? Was it B, Greg Pruitt in the year 1983? Or was it C, Fulton Walker in the year 1985? So I'll ask you, Heidi, what do you think? Roger Byrd, Greg Pruitt, or Fulton Walker?
Now, I know the answer to this question. And it's not just because you already gave me the answer.
Okay. So you were going to guess the answer anyway.
I was going to guess the answer anyways, just because I have a soft spot for this player. But I had never heard of Roger Byrd, so that might make me a bad Raiders fan, but I'd never heard of him, so I wasn't going to guess him. And Greg Pruitt and Fulton Walker, they both were at about the same time, but I always just had a soft spot for Fulton Walker. I was going to guess him.
And you would have been absolutely correct, and you are correct. So Fulton Walker in 1985 is the Raider who recorded the most yardage for punt returns during a single season. And that is this week's version of Did You Know?
You know who else I had a soft spot for always?
Who?
Rocket Ismail.
Yeah. Rakib.
A lot of people forget he was even on the team ever, but I always had a soft spot for him.
Absolutely. There are a lot of good Raiders who have returned kicks, even though they made their name and buttered their bread doing other things. But we had a lot of good guys back there returning kicks.
And that about does it this week on the Only Nation podcast. If you'd like to help support the show, you can send in a donation at paypal.me/OnlyNationPod. You can find me, Heidi Stabbert, on social media as at Kevlar Prom Dress on Twitter and Instagram, or Heidi Stabbert on Facebook. I'm still on my social media hiatus, but I did post a lovely picture of a bear on Instagram. A bear with a sockeye salmon, nice big red salmon. So I was on Instagram this past week.
All right, Raider Nation, the season is now almost here, and we want you here with us. So send us your name and address so we can send you some free Raiders swag and podcast stickers. Call us and tell us what you want to know. Throw us an interesting nugget that we can use on one of our upcoming episodes and become a part of what we're doing here. Remember, this is the Only Nation, and we want you to be a part of it. So call us 904-701-8667. That's 904-701-8667. Call us and tell us anything you want about the team, about the players, the direction we're heading. We want you really to join the Only Nation podcast family. Now, there are two easy ways to find me on social media. You can send me a tweet at T3_sports703, as several of you do, or you can hit me up on Facebook at Tom, Thom Jones. I want to also thank you for all your continued support of the Raider Roots podcast. As we mentioned earlier, in our next episode, we'll be going back to the year 2001.
All right, sounds good. And like I said, I was on Instagram this past week. Check out that picture of that bear. It is impressive. That fish is just gorgeous.
The picture is unbearable.
It is unbearable. I have so many pictures of bears on Instagram. So
well, you live in Alaska. I mean, bears are all about that.
I know. I have one of the last pictures I put up is a picture of an actual golden book. The little children's books that my parents and my brother read to me when I was growing up. And this one is titled "Go to Sleep, Tasty Little Campers." And it's told by a bear.
I saw a picture of two bears that were somebody was driving in their car, and they were driving by a driveway, and there were two bears in the driveway. And since this is a family show, we can't include what that picture was all about. So you can use your imagination.
Yeah, that I do not have up on any of my accounts, but yes, I'm at one with bears and moose a lot living here. I have not run into a bear personally in a while, just on the street. Thank God.
Let's keep it that way.
I'm finally at the point where I'm walking my dog again. I was just traumatized running into it that one night. But, we survived. I survived. So I'm back to walking my dog again. So she's happy.
There's only one thing worse than encountering a full-size bear. That's encountering a baby bear.
I'm still not sure what it was. It was kind of medium sized. I'm not sure if Mama was around. It was late in the season. All right. Anyways, guys, thanks for joining us today. We always look forward to hearing from you. Until next time, everyone, go Raiders.
We are not just a nation. Remember, we are the only nation. Raiders.